Hey guys, so today Chris and I are going to be talking about center of mass, but this time it's going to be for the upper body and the ways it can help you with your squat, your bench and your deadlift. So we're going to be going over a few different exercises that you can use to help each of these lifts. But first and foremost, we're going to talk about the ways each of our center of masses changes between squat, bench and deadlift. So Chris here is going to show us what it looks like. So we're going to start off with what the deadlift needs generally with the upper body. What we want here is we want our upper body or our upper back to be pushed backwards. So you look at Chris here, his ribs are going back, his arms are reaching forward. This is going to allow us to put our lower body into a better position of producing force for a deadlift. A squat is a little bit different. A squat, we generally want our hips and our ribs stacked above one another, almost like that stacked canister position. And then the bench is going to be the complete opposite. Bench, we want ribs forward as far as we can, trying to get as big of an arch as possible or as much extension as we can. So looking at the squat here, we can see that Chris is generally in a position that's considered a bit more stacked, trying to keep his ribs and his hips above each other as much as he can while still allowing himself to move into a hinge. This will be more of a tall spine position. We can look at training this tall spine position and stacked hips and ribs position with something like a dumbbell shoulder press. In this position here, our hips and ribs are going to be relatively above one another or below one another, and the pressing overhead is going to be putting us into a position of thoracic extension. This can generally be useful for squats because it helps promote that tall spine position and allows us to stay strong up against the barbell.
Moving on from the squat, we've got the bench press. As we were talking about earlier, the bench press is going to use a more ribs forward position or ribs to roof, where we're trying to get as much thoracic extension so that way our rib cage can sit as high as possible, creating that nice arch that we're after. What we'll find here with the rib cage up is that we'll allow our scapula to naturally depress, creating a nice effective press for us. If you find that you are someone who struggles with keeping the ribs up during a bench press, something that can be really effective for you would be using a ribs forward row like I'm doing here. The goal is to try to keep as much thoracic extension or that rib forward position while trying to squeeze our shoulders up and back to get as much retraction while not letting the chest drop throughout the row.
Lastly, we have the deadlift, and as you can see, it is much more of a rounded upper back position or more of a hunchback position like so. One of the ways that we can isolate this with our upper body is something like a barbell, machine, or cable preacher curl. So if you don't have a preacher curl, you can use something like a glute ham raise or a GHD. And all you're trying to do is you're trying to push your rib cage back as much as you can. So we want to try and avoid trying to do like an ab crunch where we're trying to round or flex our abs in the stomach. And we're mostly trying to feel like we get a stretch in our upper back by pushing our upper back away as we curl. So these exercises are just a few examples of some of the ways that we can push ourselves and our upper body into either a forward, middle, or posterior center of mass sort of position. But there's a million different ways we can go through this. You can trial and error your own sort of exercises here to see what works better for you. Our general recommendations is that you want to try and do these movements either the day before or as a warm-up on the same day as your exercise. Best to start implementing this on potentially your secondary or your tertiary day before worrying about trying to think about things on your primary day. And eventually what you'll start to find is that this will bleed over into the primary day automatically and everything will just feel very autonomous during your lifting. So good luck, give it a try.